The Princess in the Garden. It was a radiant afternoon in May, the kind of day when London dared to dream it was part of the Mediterranean. Sunlight danced off the dewy petals in the Buckingham Palace gardens, where cherry blossoms fluttered like confetti above a crowd of fascinators and finely tailored suits. It was a day of royal tradition, one of tea, courtesy, and quiet celebration. But for the Princess of Wales, this particular garden party was about more than pageantry. It was a moment of rebirth. The gates had opened at 3, but guests had been streaming into the palace grounds long before then. Civil servants, military officers, community volunteers, and unsung heroes of the kingdom milled together beneath white marquees, sipping elderflower cordial and scanning the crowd for familiar faces and for her. Then, as the palace band's violins shifted gracefully into the strains of Elgar's Salat d'Amour, the whisper passed through the crowd like a breeze before a storm. She's here. The Princess of Wales stepped onto the garden path with effortless poise, her sapphire blue dress catching the light like water in motion. A matching wide-brimmed hat sat like a crown of sky above her calm, smiling face. Her heels sank softly into the grass as she moved toward the crowd, a gloved hand lifted in graceful greeting. Her presence was not loud. It was not theatrical. It was felt, like warmth returning after a long winter. People said she had changed since the king's illness. Since the children had grown bolder and the weight of the monarchy shifted on younger shoulders. She had grown quieter, some said. Others wiser. But here she was, radiant and composed, speaking with school teachers and nurses as if they were old friends. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Lady Winthrop, whose family had served at court for generations, watched from beneath her parasol. She reminds me of Queen Alexandra, she whispered to a friend. There's something in her. Dignity tempered with kindness. And those eyes, they see everything. Indeed, the princess saw more than most. As she moved from group to group, she asked questions no one expected. She remembered a nurse's story about caring for refugees. She inquired about a child's rare medical condition she had read about in a letter. She knew the name of a gardener from Leeds who had turned his allotment into a haven for the elderly. And with each word, she gave not just time, but attention. In her presence, people felt visible. A boy named Oliver, barely 10 and dressed in a tiny suit, stood at the front of the crowd, clinging nervously to his mother's hand. She was a midwife from Kent, invited for her extraordinary work during the winter hospital crisis. The princess crouched before the boy and smiled. "And what do you think of this party, Oliver?" she asked gently. His voice trembled. It's big." She laughed, a clear, melodic sound that rippled through those nearby. "Yes, it is rather big, isn't it? But I think you're very brave to come. Would you like a lemonade?" The boy nodded, and she beckoned to a footman nearby who fetched a tray. She handed him a glass herself, and the boy's wide eyes shone with delight. Somewhere nearby, a photographer from a national newspaper captured the moment. The next day, it would be splashed across front pages, a princess for the people. But for now, the princess moved on. She passed through rose arches and beneath fluttering flags, her gloved fingers trailing over hedgerows trimmed to perfection. An elderly veteran offered her a daffodil from his lapel, and she took it, placing it carefully beside the brooch at her shoulder. Every gesture was authentic. Every smile reached her eyes. But inside, there was a quiet ache. She had dreamt of this garden before, so many times as a girl. She remembered the pages of books with illustrations of royal garden parties, the gowns, the grandeur, the elegance of it all. Yet none of those pages had captured the weight of expectation or the private battles behind the public calm. Weeks earlier, she had stood in this same garden alone, walking in the rain, her thoughts on the future of the crown, on her husband's burden, and her children's innocence. And now, here she was, smiling for 1,000 cameras, embracing strangers with the warmth of a sister. It was both a duty and a gift. As the afternoon wore on, The princess took a moment of quiet. She slipped away from the crowd, toward the wisteria-shaded bench beside the pond. Her lady-in-waiting followed at a respectful distance. For a moment, the air was still. She closed her eyes. "How are you, ma'am?" came a gentle voice beside her. It was Mr. Alcott, the royal gardener, a man who had worked in the palace gardens for over 40 years. He carried a trowel in one hand and wore a sun-stained hat that looked older than the princess herself. She smiled softly. "Tired, Mr. Alcott, but glad to be here." "Spring's always the hardest work," he said, not unkindly. "You coax and you wait and you hope. But the blooms, they come when they're ready. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel." She looked at the swan gliding across the pond. "Yes," she said. "They do." There was a silence between them, thick with unspoken truths. He did not bow or offer platitudes. He simply sat beside her, letting the scent of hyacinth fill the space between royal formality and shared humanity. "I lost a rosebush this winter," he said at last. "One of the old ones. I thought it was gone for good. But then last week, would you believe it? New shoots, green as anything. Life's like that." She turned to him, her eyes shining. "Yes, it is." From across the garden, a footman approached with a message. It was time for the final walkabout. She rose gracefully, nodding to Mr. Alcott. "Thank you," she said, "for everything you grow." "And thank you, ma'am," he replied, "for everything you carry." As she returned to the guests, the evening sun filtered through the trees like liquid gold. The band played a medley of British hymns and folk songs. And the princess walked among the people once more, a symbol not just of royalty, but of resilience, empathy, and grace. At 5:30, the bells of the palace rang softly. It was time to draw the party to a close. The princess took her final steps across the lawn, pausing to thank the staff, to curtsy to a duchess, to hug a child who had waited hours for a glimpse of her. She disappeared through the palace doors with the same quiet dignity with which she had arrived. The crowd lingered a while longer, reluctant to leave the spell of the afternoon. That evening, headlines praised her elegance, her fashion, her warmth. Commentators spoke of revived monarchy and modern regality. But in the quiet hearts of those who met her, the memory was simpler and far more lasting. They would not remember the hat or the heels. They would remember how she listened. They would remember how she made them feel like the most important person in the garden. And perhaps, on some quiet night years from now, one of them might plant a rosebush and think of the princess who came not to rule above them, but to walk beside them in the garden. Subscribe the channel to get such videos.